bitter boardroom battle between Cyrus Mistry and the Tatas. Let's go across now to Nisha Poddar to get a sense of what this Mistry response is likely to be. Remember, the EGMs will start now, and the first one is TCS. So what will the Mistry camp respond with? Let's get across to Nisha for more. Nisha. Well, what I am given to understand is that Cyrus Mistry's response to shareholders is essentially going to say that Tata Group is no one's personal fiefdom. The Tata Trust governance standard has been lost and needs to be reclaimed. A retired chairman can always feel that his legacy is under threat. Your company has no reason to be swayed by the conduct of Tata Sons. Tata Sons does not guarantee any financial assistance for your company. Your company has done its best to help Tata Sons retain its equity ownership. So this is what we are given to understand will be part of the EGM response. Also remember, talking about the fact that the Articles of Association states that a selection committee must be formed for the removal of chairman, but as we've discussed here several times on the program, and experts have weighed in that a selection committee cannot be there for the removal of chairman. But let's go across now to Mr. Subramanian of InGovern. He joins us. Mr. Subramanian, appreciate you joining us. So we understand that the response from the Mistry camp to the EGM is essentially going to try and drive home the point that the Tata Group is not one person's fiefdom, that the governance standards of Tata Trust need to be reclaimed, that a retired chairman can always feel that his legacy is under threat, and so on and so forth. Do you believe that this is going to wash with shareholders?
Yes, as we have said, right from October 24th, when Mr. Cyrus Mistry was replaced by Mr. Ratan Tata, there didn't seem to be a logical explanation by the board of Tata Sons as to what merited this replacement in the first place. And two is what is meriting his removal from each of the boards of the operating companies. And three is, going forward, the Tata Group needs to define clearly the relationship between the trusts and Tata Sons and the operating companies. And there has to be greater amount of transparency and, I would say, disclosures with respect to these entities. Because otherwise, Ratan Tata coming back as interim chairman has completely destroyed any planning at Tata Sons for succession planning or for leadership development, and it leaves a very sad state of affairs now.
There is, well, that is one point of view, and there is the other point of view which the Tatas argue is that as the principal shareholder, we are well within our rights to remove or replace somebody as chairman, and we've chosen to exercise that right as the principal shareholder. And now it will come down to the EGM, where shareholders will get to decide the fate of both Cyrus Mistry and, in a sense, Ratan Tata. From the sound of it, we seem to be picking up that perhaps institutional support will back the Tatas, because they believe that the principal shareholder is really what shareholders would like to bet on to ensure that there is continuity, that there is financial assistance, there is financial backing, financial guarantees, and so on and so forth. But you believe that shareholders may in fact vote the other way?
Yes, I mean, I have reason to believe, and we have stressed this again and again, that institutional and retail investors need to think independent of the dominant shareholder. What is good for the dominant shareholder, which is Tata Sons?
Can you really think independent of the dominant shareholder, Mr. Subramanian?
Yes, I mean, at least as an operating company, eventually the future, maybe some of these companies can be spun off on their own. And why not? Already, if you actually take off the cross holdings, the Tata Sons shareholdings in some of these companies will be less than 20%. One. Two is going forward, what is the plan? I mean, it is not that a single individual like Tata Sons is going to be there for ever. So there has to be a succession planning in place. There has to be more transparency. So because I don't see any external person coming and replacing Mr. Cyrus Mistry as chairman of Tata Sons now, because when he had performed well and for the last 4 years, suddenly overnight somebody chose to replace him. And that is not a good sign of a company or a group that is large and that is that has a sustainable future. So we are, as investors, should be responsible for creating sustainable companies, and we should hold the board responsible for that. And that is not being coming out in this case.
Okay, hang in there, Mr. Subramanian. I'll come back to you, but let me also bring in Shailesh Haribhakti. Mr. Haribhakti, appreciate you joining us. I'm going to quote to you what is going to be, in a sense, the sum and substance of the argument that Cyrus Mistry is going to present as part of his response to shareholders when the EGMs happen. Sum and substance, the Tata Group is no one's personal fiefdom. The Tata Trust governance standards have been lost, needs to be reclaimed. A retired chairman can always feel like his legacy is under threat. Your company has no reason to be swayed by the conduct of Tata Sons. Tata Sons does not guarantee any financial assistance for your company. Your company has done its best to help Tata Sons retain its equity ownership. I would imagine that the last few lines would be more relevant in the case of a company like TCS, where no financial assistance is required, but may not necessarily hold true for some of the other operating companies. But the sum and substance of the Mistry response, Mr. Haribhakti, your first comment.
My first comment is that there is information asymmetry between the majority shareholders and the minority shareholders. And I think this is the core issue which we will need to have addressed. I think both sides are now giving information which is already known and using that as potential levers to get votes to their side. What needs to be done is to make the same information that they possess about the performance, about the strategies, about the future of these companies to everybody, so that the minority shareholders, the institutional shareholders, and everybody is in a position to take proper call and a proper vote. So I think the time has come for a little more transparency. The time has come for a little more reduction in information asymmetry. And it looks like this is all going to the vote. And I mean, I don't think there's a straight answer as to who's going to vote which way and for what reason. People will vote with emotion, some will vote with data, some will vote with information, some will vote because they have a pre-decided path, some will vote because of perception. So I think it is now going to be, because there's too little time to even become more transparent. So with whatever information is now available, the voting will have to go forward. And the respect will have to be paid to the winner.
Yes. You know, we were in conversation with Mr. Subramanian of InGovern, and he's still with us. And his point of view is that shareholders should decide, keeping aside the views of the dominant shareholder. How easy do you believe that that is going to be when it comes to institutional investors, Mr. Haribhakti?
I mean, I think nobody can ignore whatever information and whatever shareholding pattern is visible. I don't think people can ignore that. Everything is known as to who owns how much share before crossing out the cross holdings, after crossing out. Everything is known. So there is no mystery about who owns what percentage of the shareholding. And even in terms of the ownership of Tata Sons, it is known that even Tata Sons is owned 18.5% by the Shabaji Palanji family. And that if you cross out the cross holdings in Tata Sons itself, their holding is slightly higher. So all these facts are known. And the brute majority in Tata Sons is held by the trust. This is also a known fact.
Yes.
Everybody knows these facts, and people are going to vote with full knowledge of all these facts. It won't be ignored. It can't be ignored. It is known. So what is known cannot be ignored.
Hang in there, Mr. Haribhakti. I'll come back to you in just a second. Let me also bring in Mr. H.P. Ranina. Mr. Ranina, we understand that Cyrus Mistry has put together the response for the EGM, and broadly, as I was pointing out, the sum and substance is likely to be that, look, you know, this cannot operate as somebody's personal fiefdom. It cannot operate with one individual's whims and fancies. It needs to go beyond that. You need to reclaim your independence and so on and so forth. But do you believe that this response is likely to be enough to get people to back his position?
Well, I mean, nobody can dispute what Cyrus Mistry says, that obviously every shareholder has to take an independent view and not be carried away either by the name or by the fact that somebody has, you know, major shareholding. Because major shareholding is always there in most companies, but then if the shareholders are going to be steamrolled by the major shareholder, then the minority shareholders' interests are not protected. So obviously every shareholder will have to take a view on merits. What are the merits of the case? And irrespective of the shareholding, he has to exercise his vote. That's how that's why he's there as a shareholder. If he's going to go by the majority vote, then his presence becomes irrelevant. Therefore, I think every shareholder will have to exercise his vote based on the merits of the case. And if either side, I'm not taking sides, but if Tatas make out a good case, they can vote in favor of Tatas. If Cyrus Mistry makes out a good case, they can vote in favor of Cyrus Mistry. So let them decide the issues on merits. That's the only way by which the corporate governance can be upheld.
Sure, but you know, the fact of the matter is that there is a dominant shareholder, the principal shareholder in this case, and at least conversations or informal feedback that we've been getting specifically from institutional investors is that can you really go against the dominant shareholder, the principal shareholder, in a situation where you have a lot of these operating companies that depend on the principal shareholder, even for financial assistance?
Yes, I agree with you, but here what is the issue? The issue is only about removal of a particular director. Let us assume he continues to remain on the board. How does that affect the principal shareholder? The principal shareholder, who is a dominant majority holder, can still continue to govern the company the way he wants. So by having one individual as a director on the board, it is not going to affect the interest of the majority shareholder. He will still exercise his voting power and make sure that the companies run according to his way of thinking. So here the issue is of removal. It's not an issue on some individual. It's not an issue on some, you know, particular merits of a particular decision. This is about whether this man can be removed or not. Now, my position is that if a person, whether he stays or whether he's removed, if the majority shareholder still has his way in every respect for the running and the day-to-day management of the company, then it makes no difference whether this man continues or not.
Okay. Mr. Ranina, I would request you to hold on, sir. We've got Nisha Poddar joining us. She's just come away from that briefing with the Cyrus Mistry side. Nisha, take us through the other details. I've put together the sum and substance for the benefit of our viewers. But in terms of specifics, what will be the points of attack for the Mistry side?
It's going to be corporate governance issues, Shireen. Of course, that has been highlighted. Tata trusts and their conduct, transparency and governance is one big point of attack. The very most important thing is the removal of chairman and the process taken itself. In articles of association, it has been clearly stated, as Cyrus Mistry states in the letter to the shareholders, is through a selection committee, and only through that process he should have been removed. So there is really a breach of that particular rule while his removal has been done. But the biggest point of attack and the pitch going forward from Cyrus Mistry's side, as far as the EGM is concerned, and this attack is going to land up, the fight is going to land up on the EGM platforms of the various listed companies. It's going to be clearly the Tata brand. What Tata Group has been also stating, that it's the Tata brand that the shareholders should stick to too, because there is a friction with the chairman and the erstwhile chairman. Now, Cyrus Mistry's camp has come back with an attack saying the Tata brand is going to be valuable only as long as the Tata Trust's members retain the kind of conduct that they need to retain the sheen of Tata brand. So here is a clear attack coming in for the first time from Cyrus Mistry's camp on the Tata brand itself, the ethics, values, ethos that go with the value of the Tata brand, for which the shareholders may be going in for a vote in the EGMs. That itself has been questioned for the first time. This, Shireen, will be the most important point that the shareholders will be deliberating on going forward as well, because my sources on the investor side have shared with CNBC TV18 that from the Tata side, it is the brand that is what is going to be the biggest pitch from the Tata side to oust Cyrus Mistry from the EGMs.
Okay, you know, at the end of the day, shareholders will really look at performance, will look at who is going to be in a better position to actually deliver on returns on equity, on performance parameters. You know, when you talk about trust and brand, and all of these are nebulous, but at the end of the day, the underlying foundation for trust and brand value and all of that is performance. And I think that is what shareholders are going to be concerned about. And our understanding is that those are the questions that shareholders have asked N. Chandrasekharan and Ishant Hussain, for instance, who are representing Tatas in their conversations with institutional investors, that give us a plan, give us a vision, give us a sense of where you see things headed over the next few years. Let me go back across to Mr. Ranina. I don't know if we have Mr. Jain Gupta with us as well, and we still do have Mr. Subramanian. But Mr. Ranina, you know, at the end of the day, as I pointed out, I mean, brand and trust and all of these are intangibles, but performance is what is the underlying foundation for all of that, and that is what shareholders would want answers for.
I entirely agree with you. They will definitely ask for a blueprint of what is going to be in the next, say, 3 to 5 years. And each side will have to give its vision of what it would intend to do if it continues to be in the director of the company. And the shareholders, the investors, the mutual funds and others will have to decide based on the merits of the case. That is the crux of the matter. And this is how I think the shareholders should take a decision on the EGM day.
Yeah. Mr. Subramanian, you know, again, as I pointed out, so far from what Nisha is telling us, or what we are picking up from that letter that Cyrus Mistry has written to shareholders, we don't really get a sense of the vision that they intend to paint for shareholders in terms of how they see operating companies going forward, beyond really addressing what they see as governance issues. You know, but won't shareholders like to know more specifically what Cyrus Mistry has to say about the vision and what the Tatas present in terms of performance parameters?
Precisely, Shireen, the Tatas have not presented anything new. Cyrus Mistry at least was in the helm for the last 4 years. His performance and all the operating companies has at least been much better than what was in the past decade or so. So what we understand is there was a Vision 2025 document which was presented or to be presented internally. And so what we see is that if there had been continuity, maybe the performance would be much better. But the Tatas have chosen to replace him from each of the boards or remove him from the boards without presenting a plan. And two is, even if he had to be removed, performance is called in question. It should have been the boards of each of the companies, not just a single individual.